Welcome to the ProTaper Ultimate Key Concepts, the key concepts of the file and the key concepts of the protocol.
ProTaper Ultimate is a rotational file. It comes with a sequence with orifice openers, shapers, and finishers. It has a parallelogram cross-section with offset machining, and it comes with a variable taper and a difference of metals.
The ProTaper Ultimate can treat a wide variety of cases. It's got the smallest diameter wire of the ProTaper family, so it's got good flexibility. And the heat treatment that Luca mentioned is different across different instruments depending on the purpose that they serve.
The SX, which is our orifice opener, has a gold treatment metal. And then you go on to the more traditional M-wire metal with the slider, which enhances its cutting efficiency. And then the shaper has a gold heater treatment again to enhance its flexibility and cyclic fatigue resistance.
And we see that same metal in the finishers. So we've got the classic, the F1, F2, and F3, which are the yellow, the red, and the blue. These are designed to finish the apical shaping. And then for those slightly larger apices, we have the FX and the FXL. And as you can see, these are different. These are the blue wire, so they have that cutting efficiency, but still retain some of that flexibility in that bigger shape. So why don't we have a little look at the protocol? The protocol we're going to look at here is shaping all the way up to the F2, and that typically tends to be what you would do for the majority of cases. So we're going to utilize the slider, the shaper, the F1 and the F2, and also bring in the SX initially, which is going to be our orifice opener.
Yes, absolutely. So let's have a little look at the selection. The SX we're going to use just allows us to open the orifice. And this is what we need to try and conceptualize, is splitting the tooth up in two, the coronal part and then the apical part. So we just want to release any coronal interferences first before we rush to the apex. So we'll be using the SX for that. And then we can move on to the slider, which, remember, is that more traditional M wire with shape memory, and then we move on to the shaper, which is more the gold treated wire alloy, which has that controlled shape there. And then the F1 and F2s, we're going to finish today to an F2, a size 25 at the apex. Now, the first thing for us is to have a little scout of the canal. Okay, see whether the canal is going to be difficult, easy. Where does that hand file go? We tend to use these files with a small curvature at the apex, just to give us a bit of a negotiation around any blockages or calcifications or anything like that. And in this case, I'm just using a little bit of watch winding. I'm getting to about 2/3 of the canal, and now it starts to work. So I will just stop there and just have a little feel at what's happening. So 2/3 of the canal and slight watch winding motion.
And this is now where we'll see the advantage of doing that coronal flaring. So we saw there the size 10 file didn't quite go all the way down. The reason it's not advancing is because there is an interference higher up the canal. So utilizing something like the SX, that gold wire, we're going to see here Luca can pre-bend it, and then he's going to put it into the canal, and he'll use a brushing motion away from the furcation, so brushing here towards the mesial. And what that will do is just remove those coronal interferences, which will then make it easier for the hand file, the size 10, to get down the canal, and we should be able to measure our zero reading after that. So 3 working brushes and the debris there already, and then you've got to get that irrigant in there to clean up.
Absolutely, and it's exactly that. Brushing on the way out, painting those walls, and creates loads of debris, but look how my needle already enters the canal. It gets loads of hypochlorite in there, and it allows me to then go back with my size 10 and find the orifice straight away, and it just almost glides unimpeded. Look at that. It just flies all the way almost to the end. And at this point, that's where I attach my apex locator and look for that continuous beeping. And I'm getting there. It's a little bit tight, so I will just do a clockwise third of rotation to bite and pull. Clockwise rotation and pull. I'm just squeezing that file to get that patency, and I have my apex locator on. I will get the continuous beeping there, and that's my zero reading. So I will measure that and translate this as my zero reading. And I take the slider and the glider to that zero reading personally.
Yeah, and I think that's absolutely fine because we've got a pretty small file. It's a size 16 at the tip, so it's not going to overshape apically. We're not going to destroy the apical foramen. So I think, yeah, I'm in agreement with Luca. Keeping that slider all the way to 0 is no problem at all. There's often a bit of a thought around taking this slider immediately into the root canal. For Luca and I, we like the safety of utilizing a size 10 scalp first. It may add an extra step, but we're just quite inherently cautious people. And I think particularly as you're building your skills with the system, it's a really nice way to introduce yourself to it.
And as you can see, this is more the silver, traditional silver looking night eye. We find the canal, and this is set at my 0 reading. So we'll introduce it, and it's sort of 3 working passes, and I'm just brushing ever so slightly on the way out. 2 and 3, and I'm just you can see I'm leaning a little bit towards the camera, so I'm brushing away from the danger area, away from deflecation. I'm brushing on the outer curvature. The 3 working passes, and I was there.
Absolutely. And the taper is such of this file that it's got that progressive taper, so it's creating an expanded glide path, which is now going to make Luca's life a bit easier when he picks up the shaper, which is a different metal. It's going to be a size 20 at the tip, and what that's going to do is further expand that coronal to then allow us to use the finishers afterwards. So we're doing work at the top of the canal here, setting the scene for the finishers, which will come shortly, but we'll look at the shaper next.
Exactly. So as John was saying, I just irrigated it, get my size 10 in there just to recapitulate, just make sure that all the debris is in solution, nice and clean, nice and smooth. We've got our shaper, gold treated, which allows us to pre-bend it if we have a difficult access to the canal. And again, we activate it, it's still 400 RPM, and you're going to have these 3 passes. So we've got 1, 2, and pretty much there actually 3, because just to make sure that path is nice and smooth and clean. And again, there's a slight, it just bites a little bit, and you just brush on the way out ever so slightly.
So the shaper there was a size 20 at the tip. We're now going to move on to the first finishing file, which is also a 20 at the tip. The only difference between the shaper and the finisher 1 is taper. Okay, so the finisher 1 has got a 7% taper apically, so it's going to start creating a deeper shape within the root canal, which is great as like a capture zone for the GP cone, which you want to fit, and it fits really comfortably and beautifully actually with this ProTaper Ultimate.
Always irrigate after your night eye file, size 10, sliding, flowing beautifully, nice and unimpeded. And now we're going to take our shapers, as John mentioned, my size 20 F1 at working length. I work 0.5 millimeter back from my 0 reading normally. Yep. Gives you that retention of the shape. I start it, and then again, I will let it just work and just brush ever so slightly on the way out. 2, 3, lovely. And you can see where the debris is. It's just working that apical portion, really giving that predictable shape deep down into the canal.
The ProTaper Ultimate, as well with the finisher files, if we compare it to the old ProTaper Gold, is a 1 millimeter wire. So it's just got that slightly enhanced flexibility that you'll really notice when you're utilizing particularly the finisher 2 and finisher 3 files. You know, that flexibility is really helpful. So we've just got a bit of irrigation going on here, and then the final part of the puzzle will be to create that last bit of apical preparation with the nickel titanium, and that will be done using the F2 finisher.
Lovely. So F2, we're going to set it to our working length, find the orifice, and again, it will just work in the very apical part. 1, 2, that's our working length.
Yeah, and it was an interesting motion there. So you saw Luca hit length and come back straight away. So we didn't linger there at length. So it's really important when you're using a file like ProTaper Ultimate, which has some rigidity to it, is that you hit length and come out, because if you hang on there, you'll transport, you run the risk of enhancing the risk of that file fracturing as well.
There we go. So we've got nicely prepared canal, but there are 2 measurements to the canal. There's the length, our working length, and there's the apical size. So we're going to apically gauge with a size 25 hand file, which corresponds to the F2, size 25. I put a little bend on a stainless steel file because it's slightly more stiff. I introduce it into the canal at my working length, place it there. And what I do is we put a little bit of digital pressure on the handle and make sure that it stays there. So now we know that this canal is prepared to my working length and the apex is gauged to a size 25. So I can go and pick up my corresponding cone and it will seat right where I want it to.
So that's the kind of basic principles behind the ProTaper Ultimate, and that's the technique you'll use for the majority of canals. Clearly, there is a diversity in anatomy that we're faced as clinicians. So we have also got the option to finish to an F1 in a trickier case, maybe expand up to an F3, the FX and the FXL in slightly wider, more diverse anatomies. And if that's of interest, you want to explore the system further, feel free to look at our other videos.